So, you want to know about Dracula events. Now, normally here is when I would do some sort of pithy, rhyming intro where I imply the seriousness of the tactics that I'm about to infer upon you in a way to hype it up as a big deal. But I'm not doing that this time. One, because I'm lazy, but two, because understanding Dracula events is actually not that important for Dracula players and for Hunter players. And the biggest reason for this is that in most games you will not see Dracula events, or you will maybe see a Dracula event. On average, I would say you will see one Dracula event in a game. Sometimes you'll see more, a lot of times you'll see less, as in 0. I don't think Hunters should never Night Supply. I think there's a tendency in the meta right now for Hunters to never Night Supply. I think that can be a dangerous or short-sighted strategy. And part of the reason I think that's happening is because I think people don't fully understand just the gauge of how bad or good or destructive Dracula events can be. They can be very, very destructive, but it's not a lose-the-game situation. So I want to go through and talk about them. Now, Dracula events I put in basically 3 categories. If I had more time and wasn't so lazy, I would do a tier list, but basically there's 3 tiers. There's the horrible, oh my gosh, these are the worst thing ever cards, the ones that are very bad and destructive, but you can work around them and they aren't necessarily the worst thing ever. And then there are the ones that are, oh, that's not so bad. And it's like, oh good, man. And you feel relieved. It's like, oh, I only have to do this. So there's the really bad, the bad, and then the not so bad. I'm going to start with the really bad ones, because those are the most important ones for you to understand. And I'll start with Unearthly Swiftness. Unearthly. There it is. Okay, so this one I classify as really bad. It may not seem that way to you. It was like, okay, he gets to do 2 moves. Why is that so bad? Well, it's not that bad if Draculas use it incorrectly. The way Draculas should use this card is to hold onto it. This is one of those Dracula events that you want to hold onto. And I would say, for the most part, nearly every single Dracula event card that you can hold onto, you should hold onto until it's best to use. That's really important, especially for these really powerful ones like Unearthly Swiftness. If you just use Unearthly Swiftness randomly for a double move, it's actually not that big of a deal. What you want to use Unearthly Swiftness for is in 2 circumstances. These are the 2 main ones you want to use it in. The first is when you're in a corner and you really need to get away from the Hunters. It's really helpful at that point. It allows you to go even further than they can catch you. It allows you to move as fast as the Hunters for 1 turn and throw down 2 encounters. That's really, really useful. And the best thing about that is that it's something that the Hunters don't expect. If Dracula's holding on to a Dracula event, maybe they can expect it, but there's only 1 of these, well, sort of 2, because Darkness Returns sort of works like a Unearthly Swiftness, but I'll get to that. And so it's something that the Hunters, should understand that is theoretically possible, but in terms of statistical likelihood, it's not that likely. There's basically 2 of these in the deck, this and Darkness Returns, and there's 25 Dracula events, so it's not going to be within their radar, and so the, oh my gosh, he's moving twice, really big deal, really allows you to get around them. The second circumstance where you can use Unearthly Swiftness, and this is where it's really devastating, is to force a mature. Often, Hunters will operate being like, okay, I have this many turns in order to get to this location in order to deal with this encounter. And they will operate under that calculus and won't overcommit to deal with encounters because they're like, okay, we have time to deal with it. And then, Dracula can use an Unearthly Swiftness to make something that's on the 5th slot suddenly mature. And that's really, really devastating, especially and really only when you want to use it to mature a really, really bad encounter, like a hoax or a fog that's going to trap a hunter, or a vampire with a rumor token. All of those things you can use Unearthly Swiftness for, and those circumstances are really likely. So just holding on to this means you're going to get really significant value out of it as Dracula, and you can just completely set the Hunters back. Another thing you can use it for is to force Wolf Form to slide off the trail faster and then use it. Similar circumstance to the first thing I was talking about. You know, they're expecting, oh, he's not going to get Wolf Form until this happens. You use an Unearthly Swiftness, you get it faster. That kind of stuff is just so devastating to the Hunters. It sets them back more than just an extra Dracula phase. Because they aren't expecting it. It eats 4-day actions for the hunters, basically. Well, 4-day actions and 4 night actions, which is like delaying all of the hunters twice. That's just really, it's really, really powerful. That's why it's one of the worst ones. The other one that is really, really bad is actually Summon Storms. And I'm listing Summon Storms, and I'm not listing Roadblock. Roadblock is actually just a bad card. It's not a super bad card. Why is Summon Storms super bad and Roadblock isn't? Well, there's a couple reasons. One, Summon Storms can't be stopped by Good Luck, which is actually really huge. It means that when you put down the Summon Storms, there is literally no counterplay to it. It can't be stopped with Forewarned, like Fog can. You can't use Good Luck on it, like Roadblock can. There's literally no counterplay. And there's lots of just devastating things that you can do with Summon Storms, like moving to England and then waiting until someone goes to a port and then throwing down the storm so they can't get to you for several turns. Summon Storms often forces wins for Dracula, in that it's towards the end of the game and then Dracula escapes to sea, and then you can just do things like go to Cagliari, score the 3 points of Fury of Dracula, and then hide with the 3 points, and get 6 points for free, and you're using your Summon Storm to protect you where you literally can't lose. It shifts the game's turn in terms of the number of turns you need to win is now less because you have Summon Storms in your hand. And that's really, really good. That effectively makes it the same as 3 to 6 points. And that's 3 to 6 points the hunters don't know that you have. That's unimaginably huge. The hunters can theoretically play around it, but they won't know that you have it unless Behind the Veil is drawn. If they move ahead, like, and keep somebody in England, then you could go to Ireland. And then if they're in England, you can still play Summon Storms and then trap them in England. It's so good because it's so hard to play around it. Now, it's easily wastable. Understand that the hunters move faster on land, so you only want to use it when the hunters really have to move by sea, or when moving by land would be really, really slow for them. And so I see it misused a lot, which is why I think a lot of people don't see it as being really, really bad. But this literally can reduce the number of turns you need to win by doing things like I said, like going to Cagliari and then throwing it down and being like, okay, you can't get to me for 2 more turns, and then by the time you get adjacent to me, then I leave again, and then I can score another points with my Fury of Dracula ability. Yeah, it's that good. And that's really all I have to say about it. A card like that, which just gives you free points and it's a surprise, and it can be used as an escape if you need to, where you go to sea and then they would have to go a longer way by not going to sea, although do the math on that to make sure that it actually is longer by them going by land. Yeah, it's really good. I wouldn't say it's the worst of the worst. I'd actually say it's the least worst of the worst, if that makes sense. I think all of the other cards I'm going to mention in this tier are worse than these, but yeah, it's really bad. Let's talk about Darkness Returns. Now this is, I think, the worst card in the game. There's an argument for the other one, which I'll get to. Darkness Returns is really bad for a whole bunch of reasons, because it does a whole bunch of things. It's sort of like Fog in the sense that it's kind of a Swiss Army chainsaw. So, firstly, Dawn is skipped, which means, and this is something I don't think a lot of people know about this means you can move into a hunter's space, play Darkness Returns, and then you don't fight them in day, but you do fight them at night. So if you wanted to attack a hunter and try to get into a fight, you could play Darkness Returns. So that literally makes Darkness Returns have the same effect as Nocturnal Visit. Except, in addition to Nocturnal Visit, it does a whole bunch of other stuff. So, yeah, it's literally the designers of the game are going like, yes, this card, which is basically just like a card meaning evil wins, is supposed to be the worst Dracula event, and it's designed that way on purpose. In 2nd edition, it was even more lopsided. There was events that would just let Dracula move to literally any location, and you had to play around that event. It was more balanced in 2nd edition because Good Luck could cancel any Dracula event. They toned down Good Luck, and then they toned down the events in some regards, but not in regards to Darkness Returns. Darkness Returns is still amazing, incredible. So yeah, because I haven't even gotten past the first 3 words of the card. So also, day is skipped, so that means 4 day actions gone for the hunters, which effectively makes this the same as Unnatural Swiftness. The only difference being the hunters still get their night actions, which are not that useful, especially for hunting down Dracula. So effectively it's the same as Unearthly Swiftness. It's just worse, because it also does all of the other stuff that I'm going to get to. I guess theoretically they're still able to play Consecrated Ground. But making it where the phase is skipped, it also forces time to advance faster. Well, no, but I think Unearthly Swiftness also forces time to advance faster. Which effectively makes Unearthly Swiftness worth 3 points, and Darkness Returns worth 3 points at the end of the game when you're allowed to do a double move, in addition to doing all of the stuff that they say. Yeah, it's like a Swiss Army chainsaw, like Fog. But yeah, also all of the effects of Unearthly Swiftness in terms of the value from a double move also applies to Darkness Returns, except you can also use it to attack. But the most important, or the biggest thing about it, is that in addition to all of the stuff that I just said, also, you remove all Dracula events cards from the discard pile and shuffle them into the event deck. So it's also a hoax, which is the best encounter in the game. So it's the best encounter mature effect in the game, it's something you can use to attack at night, oh, and it's double move. It's everything. They just took everything that you could want to do as Dracula, and they put it into one card and called it Darkness Returns. That's what it is. There's only one in the deck, so should you be that scared of it? I don't know how to answer that. If you see it in the discard pile, maybe be more aggressive and be like, oh, that's good. I don't have to worry about it. Is a thought that you can have. I don't know. That's really a mathematical strategy thing. You have to sort of calculate the risk you're willing to take when you're trying to decide if you want to do a night supply action. And this video isn't really on night supplies. I'm just wanting to sort of explain to you how bad various events are. So yeah, Darkness Returns can do everything you want. The only other card that can do everything you want is Emmanuel Hildesheim. I have all of my cards from my game out in front of me, and I'm sort of going through them because I'm a nerd. Anyway, Emmanuel Hildesheim. So, he's an ally. Now, this is a little odd, because normally, allies for Dracula aren't that good. The other 2 allies, not actually that bad. They're actually both in the not-so-bad stack. Emmanuel Hildesheim, the worst. Arguably worse than Darkness Returns for the same reason that Mystic Research is arguably one of the best cards. Because of the assist effect. Never play Emmanuel Hildesheim for his ally effect. Generally, I would say never play the allies for their ally effect. There's a few reasons for that. The first is that good luck can discard them. The second is that the ally effects just aren't strong. They're not good. The once per game effects are really, really good. I think that's maybe a flaw in the design. I think they should have made it where you generally want an ally, and then the once per game is like a consolation prize. They do that with the hunter allies. The hunter allies certainly feel like that. You certainly tend to feel like you aren't getting much when you do the once per game. The once per game for Emmanuel Hildesheim, it's so much that you just want to do the assist. I'm not even going to talk about the ally effect. I'm only going to talk about the assist. I could talk about the ally effect. I'm literally not going to because of how powerful the assist effect is. Okay, look at the back of the top 6 event cards. Draw all Dracula events and discard the others face up. So I'm going to start with the end of that and go back. So the fact that the non-Dracula events are discarded face up is actually really big. When you know that you don't have to worry about a money trail, or don't have to worry about consecrated ground, or you see one of the renewed vigors get gone, or you see Mystic Research discarded, those, in the same way that if you watched my hunter tier list, I talk about certain hunter events that change the calculus of the game by having them. When you know that the hunters will not get that event, and I think it's mathematically impossible for the event deck to reshuffle. So when something is discarded, it is gone. Unless it's a ally, but I've talked about that. That's really, really big. It allows you to stop worrying about, it's like, oh, Great Strength is gone. I don't have to worry about having to play around Great Strength or having any fear of that. yeah, that's really, really powerful. Now, it may be that you just reveal, like, hired scouts and a blood transfusion, but the other things that this card does are also insane. Drawing all Dracula events. So, on average, you will get 2 Dracula events out of this. So already, Emmanuel Hildesheim is a Dracula event that gets you 2 Dracula events, on average, because 1/3 of the cards are Dracula events, and 1/3 of 6 is 2. Now, you may get more, you may get less, you may get none, but even if you draw 6 Hunter events, that's 6 Hunter events you get to look at it and be like, oh, they don't have. And you have now crafted the deck to be more Dracula event heavy. This is good for all of the same reasons that Mystic Research is good. But it's done from the top of the deck, and top deck supplies are the most common against good players, which is why good players are so afraid of this card. Yeah, it's another one of those moments where, like, man, this guy was in the book so little. He was just an assistant of Dracula who I didn't even know he was actually working for Dracula. He was just sort of corrupt and managing his financial affairs. And eventually they are able to pay him off and get some information about Dracula in the book. But, yeah. Just the fact that it can get you more events, it could get you more Darkness Returns, and yeah, it could get you bad events, and so that, it could be bad. So in that regard, it's like Mystic Research, and that's why I like Darkness Returns more. I'd rather get the good event than the thing that maybe gets me the good event and more events. But more events is good, and making the deck more full of Dracula events, so it's less likely for the Hunters to get events, is really, really good. Because the Hunters win with their events. And so getting rid of their ability to get the events, I mean, you really can't ask for more than that. So now I'm going to move on to the... So that was what? So that was 4 cards, although one of those cards was a double. So that's 5 cards. 5 of the 25 are really, really bad. Like atomic bomb level, Dracula draws this, and like, you can still theoretically win, but it has become really hard to win now. Now, of the bad cards, and these are cards that are still bad to get and can really wreck your day and change things, there are 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's 11. 11 plus 5, that's 16. So 16 of the 25 are either bad or really bad cards. Are you understanding why we don't want to Night Supply? Why we don't want to give Dracula events? But let's look at it and see what there is. So let's talk about Vampiric Influence. Let's see. Vampiric Influence. Okay, so this card may not seem like that bad of a card. You may look at this and be like, why isn't this in the bad category? All you're doing is moving Mina, basically. You get to move Mina, look at her hands. You're already looking at 1 or 2 of her cards. And then you get to choose an item or event to discard. Okay, you could use this to discard Consecrated Ground. You could use this to discard Renewed Vigor, which generally is hopefully making you think, if you have a super valuable event, don't put it on Mina if you're going to be Night Supplying. But you could also use it to discard a Heavenly Host, or even just know that they have a Heavenly Host. And you could use it, and I've been seeing some games on Scott Sword's channel, where generally it's used to discard horses. That's really big, because losing horses can be a really big setback. And the Hunter moves, which basically burns a day action. And that's really, that's also really good. So it burns a day action, you get free information, and you can discard an event or an item. Now, maybe you don't happen to be able to discard a really good event or an item, but if you could consistently discard a really good event, this would be highest tier. This would be the really bad card. But because sometimes you don't discard a really good event or really good item, I'm putting it just in the bad tier. But there are 2 of these. That's really bad. Losing a Consecrated Ground, or a Money Trail, or even like a Great Strength, or even just knowing that they have a Great Strength and then discarding the horses, it really sets the Hunters back. And every time you're seeing one of these cards, this was drawn instead of an event. So all of the damage that I'm talking about, add on the fact, and you didn't get a Hunter event, and you wasted an action, helping Dracula, which you could have been using to improve your horse economy, or trading items, or resting to heal, or just not doing anything. Dracula's powerful enough without you helping him. Okay, let's talk about wild horses. Now, wild horses is sort of like the poor man's Unearthly Swiftness, in the sense that instead of burning 4 day actions, you are burning basically 2 day actions. So, Unearthly Swiftness burns all of the hunter's day actions, so that's 4 day actions that it's burning. Wild horses is when a hunter would move by road, so when they are spending a day action, instead you move them to, once after they've moved, you move them to a new city, and only the new city is revealed. So their day action is basically lost, and then you force them to have to spend another day action to get to where they wanted originally. You have to be a little careful with how you use this. Sometimes you can play it in a circumstance where, oh, any of the cities I move to could be good. And so usually what you want to do is just move the hunter back to the city. You can do some interesting things like forcing the hunter to move into a space with a really bad encounter on a lair or even on your trail, like forcing them to get trapped in fog, or forcing them to move into a space with both of your vampires, with a vampire and the hidden vampire. Those are all fine. I will say that currently in the game, and I think the devs have said that they're going to work on fixing this, so hopefully by the time this video comes out, or by the time you're watching this, if this video is really old, they fixed this, but currently this doesn't trigger on fast horses, and I think the consensus in the community, of the board game community, is that it should, because as far as we can tell, although all of the cards are written really inconsistently, and it's really hard to tell what mechanics should be, fast horses moves you by road. In the same sense that moving by rail moves you by rail, and it follows a similar wording structure to moving by rail. But I don't want to get into that. The point is, currently, you can't play this on fast horses, which kind of makes it pretty bad, and gives you a reason to just use fast horses. Hopefully they'll fix that, and we'll be working on fixing it, and then it will be where it is now. But generally, this is one of those cards you want to hold on to. It's what you want to use when a hunter moves into your space, or would move into your trail. And then maybe sometimes don't. Because when you see a Dracula use this, the hunters are going to kind of assume, oh, he's using this to keep us from moving into his trail. So there's a little bit of psychology there, but still you're burning 2 day actions. And you made them lose a night action, helping you to have you burn 2 of their day actions. Yes, that's really, really good. It's not the worst, though. I mean, 2 day actions is bad, but it's not like eating 4 day actions and getting a free hoax, and you can attack in day and night. So it's bad. It's not end of the world. So next, let's talk about. I'm gonna talk about false tip. Now, false tip maybe you should include in the not so bad category. It certainly is in there if you have good luck. If you have good luck in your hand, false tip is in the not so bad category, because good luck cancels false tip. But I'm including it here basically in the assumption of you didn't have good luck to cancel this, because obviously if you can cancel something, it's what you want to have drawn. But if you hadn't, this is actually really bad. It burns the ticket that a hunter would use, and then you get to move them. Which could be 2 or 3 spaces away. And maybe you're able in the night phase to be able to draw a similar ticket and then move again back to where you were. But if you did that, then you have to do that again, get the same ticket, and then move again to where you wanted to go. So it's similar to wild horses in the sense that you're eating 2 day actions, but you're also eating 2 night actions. And you might be eating more than that, because they may be having to play more, do more night actions to get the correct ticket. And that sounds worse than wild horses, and that's why it's in the same tier as wild horses. But the fact that it's canceled by good luck, you just need to keep that in mind. When to use it? Now, I will say in the digital edition, it's pretty easy to know that Dracula has false tip because it's like, oh, I just use a rail, and it was like waiting on Dracula. It's like, okay, well, either it's custom search or false tip, and that's kind of sad. I wish there was a way that it wasn't that way, but it is. So I gauge the value of a lot of these Dracula events based a whole lot on how many day actions does this eat, because day actions are the currency of victory for the hunters. And this eats 2 day actions, 2 night actions, and maybe even more than that. And that's pretty good. That's... yeah. Okay. Now, regarding its charted carriage effect, that's good. That makes you eat basically 2 day actions again, because you're canceling an event, which means they spent a day action to get that event. So, that's really good, because you're eating that day action. And then, they don't do the super good move. They have to do... yeah, I think it cancels their whole event, so they don't move at all. You don't get to move them. You just keep them from moving at all. And so that eats 2 day actions again. So either way, it's a 2 day action eater. Unless they got the event at night, which is why Night Supplying is so good, because it's kind of like gaining a day action. And that's really good. Let's talk about Devilish Power. So, Devilish Power, most of these are not that bad, actually. Removing the ally, kind of bad, but you can often use Surprising Return to undo that. The Hunters cannot supply during the next Hunter phase. That tends to not be that annoying, because, you know, it's like, okay, I just have to move. I mean, you know, often I prefer to supply, but it's not that bad to move, so you're not really eating day actions doing that, because you're just sort of forcing them to do a different day action, which is... that kind of requires a bet where you really think they're going to supply. Like, okay, I guess if somebody's caught in fog, maybe that's good to do, and then you're eating day actions, and that's good. But the reason I'm including this in the bad category is because it can be used to remove the Consecrated Ground token from the board. And as we've talked about, Consecrated Ground is the best card in the game for the Hunters. Now, it doesn't remove all of the tokens, and as far as I understand, it only removes the first one you put down, the one that's permanent, not the Heavenly Host tokens. But that can be really huge. Usually, Consecrated Ground is thrown down when they're forcing Dracula to be checkmated. And so often they invest a whole lot of movement and situation to be like, we are going to position so that when we throw down these Heavenly Hosts and Consecrated Ground tokens, it forces Dracula to be in a situation where he either has to move back into our space or doesn't get any legal moves, and it's really, really bad. And I've talked on and on about how great Consecrated Ground is, and this is the card that counters Consecrated Ground. It's not a huge counter. I wouldn't even necessarily call it a hard counter. But the fact that it counters Consecrated Ground, and it can do all of those other things, makes it a bad card. Dracula getting a card that turns off your best card, yeah, that's really, really good. And it's so devastating when you do this, and it's like, nope, I have Devilish Power, so I'm going to be able to escape anyway. And it's like, okay, I just lost my best card. And it's just so devastating. So yeah, this is another one of those things you want to hold on. The only really other times I would use it is... goodness. I guess maybe if somehow it's week 1 and Jonathan Harker is out, maybe it's worth it to get rid of Jonathan Harker, or if you are planning, if you're at sea and planning to go to sea a whole lot more, use it to get rid of Rufus Smith is an okay use of it. But usually I hold on to this to get rid of Consecrated Ground, because most games, Consecrated Ground is going to come out, and this saves you from that. Okay, let's talk about Roadblock. Now, Roadblock is sort of similar to False Tip and Excellent Weather, actually. So it's similar to False Tip in the sense that Good Luck actually counters it. Or, well, you can play Good Luck to remove one of the roadblocks, which effectively counters it. Because usually when you're placing roadblocks, it's most of the time one path that you're actually trying to shut down. Like, this hunter, I do not want to move into this space. So it's similar to Wild Horses, actually, in that regard. But Good Luck can be used to cancel it. So that makes it not as bad. Now, Good Luck only removes one of the roadblocks. And that can be a little tricky, because when you place the roadblocks, it's not always apparent which path is the most important one to block. Now, some people say you use roadblock and you throw it down to block off some places that don't actually matter. So, I disagree mostly. Obviously, you should only place the roadblocks next to hunters, and you should place them next to hunters when it's obvious that the hunter wanted to use that road or rail. And that's really the extent to which you can bluff with it. Really, you want to use it to keep hunters from moving towards you. This really isn't a card you use to obfuscate, and you want to hold on to it. The best times to use it is to wait until the hunters are adjacent to you, or adjacent to your trail or an encounter you really want to protect, and then you throw it down, and you force them to go around. It's especially useful in places like Eastern Europe, where there aren't double roads, like a rail and a road, because that becomes harder, because then you have to block both, and that's less efficient. Because if you just block one, it's like, okay, well, I'll just carriage instead of rail, or I will rail instead of use a carriage, and that's, that accomplishes nothing. But you can really lock people down, and sometimes a hunter has only 3 moves to do, and you block them in, and then it's kind of the same as fog. So it has a lot of the same value in a similar way to wild horses, in that you're manipulating movement. Of these, I would say maybe it's the least worst. So it's sort of on the border between bad and not so bad. But stopping the hunters from moving is really, really strong, and it is a general counter to fast horses, because the fast horses use those red lines, and you can block those red lines and force them to start using rails, and using rails messes up their horse economy. So that's really good. This is obviously much better than the Saboteur effect, because you can hold it on to that best time. Generally, if this came out randomly, it wouldn't be that good. But there are circumstances where hunters just absolutely need to be able to move this turn. And those events will happen, and when you're Dracula, you want to wait till that happens, till there's a moment when it is obvious that the hunters absolutely need to use this path. Now, there's a little bit of cost-benefit analysis there that goes on, because the longer you wait to use this, the more likely it is that the hunters are going to have good luck. Now, it should be noted that in the digital edition of the game, you can't play good luck out of turn. Good luck just says play during day. In the digital edition, you have to play it on your turn. So, first of all, trade good lucks to Lord Godlewing. But because if it's on Mina, say, and it's Godlewing who's being blocked by the roadblocks, it isn't until Mina's turn that she can play the good luck. Now, good luck doesn't cost an action, but just understand that. And so that's a limiting factor to how good lucks can be used, and that makes Roadblock better. I'm not sure if that's an incorrect interpretation of the rules or the correct one. That's just how it works in the game, so understand that. So those are the really bad cards. So do you feel scared? Yeah, you should feel somewhat scared. But you should also be like, okay, I understand the threat that these cards can take. And when you're night supplying, you need to be thinking about those really bad cards and being like, how devastating would it be if a roadblock was drawn, or if storms was drawn? Could I deal with that? Could I deal with a Darkness Returns? So a lot of times it's like, well, I have all the events that I really need, so having all of the Dracula events shuffled from the discard pile into the deck won't really ruin my day, so Darkness Returns isn't really that bad. Of course, Darkness Returns also takes away 4-day actions, so it's always going to be pretty bad. You can't imagine a time when you're like, no, that wouldn't be that bad of an idea. But I just want you to understand the threat so that you can know when it's okay to supply. So let's talk about the not-so-bad ones. And I'm going to start with one that actually is super bad, but in certain circumstances. So let's talk about fake news. So fake news is really, really bad in the first week of the game. It's as bad as Emmanuel Hildesheim or Darkness Returns or any of those atomically bad cards in the first week of the game, before you've discovered Dracula's Trail. Because the statistics are over 80% of you finding Dracula's Trail with newspaper reports, and it is also very common that you will find him with Hired Scouts or Evil Player Presence or one of those cards. Although, if it's the first week and you get Sensationalist Press, hold it for newspaper reports, is my advice. Because it's likely a newspaper reports is going to come out, and canceling that basically ensures that you're going to mature whatever you put down. Which is really, really good and really big, and can really wreck the hunter's whole strategy. That's really, really bad. Other than that, Sensationalist Press isn't that bad. It burns basically a single day action, because you draw an event, like Hired Scouts or Evil Presence or Newspaper Reports or one of those things that you're going to play. You cancel that single event. That's not that bad. A single day action being lost, and that's bad, but you don't know if those Hired Scouts were going to find you anyway. I mean, okay, they would provide some information of checking a location, being like, oh, Dracula wasn't in these two spaces. Evil Presence and local rumors can often be really, really devastating. So having this can be good, because it can be like, oh, an Evil Presence is going to reveal which ocean I went to. That kind of thing can be really valuable. And so a Sensationalist Press can counter that, although that's very rare. The thing is, Sensationalist Press, its value is very random and very rare. And even then, most of the time, it's going to be Hired Scouts that comes out, and you play this to cancel Hired Scouts, and it's like, did that even help? I don't know. So it can be very useful, but it's too random, and generally when this is drawn or I see this played, I'm like, oh, thank goodness it was just Sensationalist Press and not one of the really bad ones. Let's talk about Nocturnal Visit. So Nocturnal Visit, I would say, is one of the worst in terms of it's not really very good. This is a card that can let you play aggressive as Dracula. Very occasionally it can be good to play aggressive as Dracula, but that's super rare. Very rarely do you want to move into a hunter's space. If you have Nocturnal Visit, it becomes maybe a little better, but it's a huge risk to move into a hunter's space. And that's really the only use for this card. It is possible to use this card to help out one of your vampire encounters, but because of the timing of this card, you play it at the end of the Dracula phase. So you play this card, and then you basically hope that during the next day action, one of the hunters is going to move into a space that has one of your vampires. And then you hope that they don't have, like, Holy Circle or Escape Route. That's really specific. And the value that it gives you, like, it's pretty good, but hunters are going to be tooling up for night fights with Dracula. They're going to be expecting night fights. So a surprise night fight, that's good, but it also means surprise. Here I am, everybody. And so, yeah, like, it's not like I wouldn't use it. Obviously, it can provide significant value. And again, if I think that hunters are going to move into a space with a vampire, maybe I'll play it. But honestly, sometimes it's better to just hold on to this and make the hunters afraid that you have something even worse. Maybe. Okay, let's talk about another one of the worst cards, the Great One. Great Wolf. Great Wolf it's really bad. Again, I wouldn't play it for the ally effect in general, although of the allies, Great Wolf is so bad that its ally effect is like, maybe go for the ally effect. Of the allies, this is the one I would maybe go for the ally effect with. Pounce can be really good. If there is a hunter that has 4 or less health, or even 5 or less health, it can be worth it to do the Pounce. And it can even be good. Like, if you can get a kill with this, it's really good. If you do it for the Pounce, you choose the hunter, and they suffer 4 damage, and they die, obviously it's really good. How often does that happen? How often does it happen when a hunter is at 4 or less health, they don't have a Heavenly Host or a Crucifix, and Great Wolf comes out? That's really, really rare. If that's not the case, sometimes I would still do it, just to get the damage. Although I will say there is reasonable value from the ally effect. And so I would often actually go with the ally effect on this, although the Pounce effect is also really, really good. And I think maybe it's 50-50 actually on this one, which one I'll go with. Now, the reason the ally effect actually can be good, and why I've kind of been warming up to this, is not because of the damage. every phase doing 1 damage to somebody, that's not a really big deal. They just are going to heal, and then it's like you're doing nothing. It just gives them something to do at night. But using it to suss out who has Heavenly Host, that's actually very valuable. And then the hunters have a really important choice of, like, do I reveal the Heavenly Host or not? And remember, there's only 2 crucifixes in the game. And the presence of this card actually makes Crucifix a little better, because being able to reveal a Crucifix instead of a Heavenly Host, really quite good. Because Heavenly Hosts, most of their value comes from their secrecy. And so having a Great Wolf to sniff out those Heavenly Hosts, that I would say is the main value from this card. But again, they can just take the damage and then heal. So it's not like there aren't entirely ways to get around it. I'm not saying it doesn't give you value, but like compared to the other events, obviously one of the worst. Let's talk about Dracula's Brides. Now this is... it's better than Great Wolf. Obviously it's not as good as Emmanuel Hildesheim. I would say Dracula's Brides is a very fun card. I wouldn't say it's a very good card. So, the 2 effects. This one, I definitely think I would go with the first effect. Choose up to 2 hideouts among the first, second, or third and play of the trail, and place 1 encounter on each. So that's good. It allows you to do really fun combos. Now, if, when Dracula's Brides came out, you happen to have the requisite encounters with which you could use to create fun combos, is pretty random. And random means unreliable, and I'm not a big fan of unreliable. But it can be really good. And really fun. And it allows you to do more of those combo type things, which is where a lot of the fun of the game comes. You can even go crazy with it, of like, I think you can put something under hide and under the location hide is associated with to ambush somebody with 4 encounters. You know, silly, fun things. You know, if they happen to be in the first, second, and third areas. But stacking a whole bunch of encounters on somewhere, like, that's not really that huge. It's not really that bad. It's like, okay, I'm putting wolves and Sisgani bodyguards. Okay, I have a gun, so I took 4 damage. Became delayed. Okay, I mean, I guess that's kind of bad, but like, that's not that bad. Not for a Dracula event. Not compared to how strong, you know, a lot of the other ones are. That's just a bunch of night actions. And then a night delay because you moved in day action. The ally effect, okay, you get to discard encounters and draw new ones. If your encounter economy is really suffering and like you've been staying at sea for a really long time, and you can't, and you just like, then maybe go for the ally effect. But again, generally I would never go for the ally effects, even, and you know, the same with Great Wolf, because good luck can get rid of them. And so just don't. The corrupt effect on this, very quite good. And Pounce on Great Wolf, really quite good. And I'm literally not even saying anything else about Emmanuel Hildesheim except for uses once per game. So Dracula's Brides, fun, not really a great one. Okay, let's talk about another one in this same vein. Enraged. So Enraged is really fun because it allows you to, this is like Dracula's version of Great Strength. It's surprise. You thought you were countering me with your punch or whatever. Instead, basically it makes it so for 1 round you can choose a hunter's card to have no symbols. It doesn't counter anything, which is actually like really crazy. Like, you could play this in combo with a Mesmerize. He plays Heavenly Host. You're like, nope, your Heavenly Host does not counter me, which means my Mesmerize counters your Heavenly Host and it doesn't go off. And now you're mesmerized. And now I know you have a Heavenly Host. That's all very, very good. And it's a fun card, and it can help you in combats. If you're getting into combats, it's a problem as Dracula. And in group fights against big groups of hunters, it doesn't really help you that much, because it just helps you in the engaged fight. And the other big thing about this is that when you play Enraged, you can't escape. And that's a really big setback. And you don't want to forget about that. I actually had a game where where Enraged was played, and then Dracula forgot about that and tried to escape, and then died. And then when the game ended, we're like, wait, why did he die? Why didn't that thing mature? We were at the point where he was able to escape, and it took me like 10 or 15 minutes, and then I was like, oh, he played Enraged and he couldn't escape. And that's a pretty big cost, because your main thing you're trying to do as Dracula is escape. So you would want to play Enraged in fights where you don't want to escape, where you're actually like winning in a fight and beating up on the hunters, which is kind of a win more situation. And I think it's best to have events that help you when you're behind, not help you win more. But again, a very fun card, not really a game-changing or super great card. Let's talk about Custom Search. So Custom Search is actually kind of similar to Great Wolf in the sense that it does a big hit of damage, and that's what it does. Because what this does is when a hunter moves from one region to another, the hunter becomes delayed. It's like, okay, that eats a night action. And then they choose to either discard all of their items, which you should never do, or suffer 3 damage. Basically, don't discard your items unless the 3 damage would kill you, and that's pretty unlikely. So 3 damage is actually quite a bit. The odd numbered damages are basically the same as the next number up. So 3 damage isn't that different from 4 damage because of how the numbers work. I think, unless I'm getting math on that wrong. But yeah, in fact, it's one of the few things that does an odd number of damage. Most things in this game do even numbered damage. The only exceptions to that, I think, is this card and the wolf effect of the 1 point of damage. But of things that do damage to hunters. I mean, I could be wrong. Let me know if I'm wrong. So 3 damage and becoming delayed. I mean, that's basically 4 damage because you would use that delayed to do a night action to heal 1 point of damage. 4 damage is like that's 2 rats. It's kind of bad. I guess you could kill somebody with it, but it's not that big of a deal. It can be great if you can get a kill with it, and maybe hold on to it to get a kill. Although I don't know. It all depends. Yeah, generally not that big of a deal. And you can only use it when someone crosses a region, which, yes, it's going to happen. It's going to happen a lot. But, yeah, this was a lot stronger in 2nd edition because it also triggered whenever somebody entered a port. I mean, people were really mad about that because it was, if you entered a port from land or from sea, now there weren't regions in 2nd edition. And some people thought it was not thematic, and they actually, like, house ruled it that if you're moving from land to a port, that it wouldn't go off. And I was like, no, that's dumb. It's actually really hard for it to trigger at that point. But they changed it, and they added regions, and it's a lot more thematic now. It's just not very, very good now. Now, let's talk about Hidden Schemes. Hidden Schemes, yeah, it's the weak version of Dracula's Brides. The difference, of course, being that with Dracula's Brides, you have to play it immediately, and then you immediately place 2 encounters on 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. Hidden Schemes, it has to be the 3rd space, which is a little awkward, but you get to hold on to it and choose and be like, okay, I'm going to choose to place an extra encounter on this and set up this combo. That's nice. Being able to have it on tap is nice. How much of a difference is a single more encounter going to do? Not that much. I mean, it can be good. It's a fun card. It maybe can be used to set up a big epic combo, but that requires you to use your good encounters, and you're gonna use your good encounters effectively. This just sort of lets you focus them, which is good, but it's not that good. And there's 2 of these in the deck. The final one I'll talk about, I think I would say this is the worst card, and it's Seduction. Okay, so Seduction, you play when a hunter performs a search action. If there is a vampire encounter in this hideout or lair, instead of resolving an encounter, the hunter is bitten. Then return the encounter to your hand. So, bites are not that big of a deal. It doesn't give you a point, like most bites do. Bites just reveal a card in your hand, okay. If this gets a kill, it's very good. But that's usually going to be when Mina searches. And a lot of times, if this was like a fighty vampire, sometimes you prefer for the vampire to fight. You don't want for the vampire to just go back into your hand, because it's basically the same as killing the vampire. So generally what this is used for is as an anti-stake card. And that's fine. It's the only card in the game that counters a stake. You know, the hunters are going, I have a stake, I don't have to worry about this vampire. Surprise, seduction, you get bitten instead. It's like, okay, I have a bite. That's not that big of a deal. There's only one of these, so it's not like you can chain bites on people. The vampire is still killed, so it's like, okay, instead of taking 2 to 4 damage, I took a bite. And that's what this card is. It's it's kind of nice with, I guess, an aristocratic vampire, because that would have died anyway. But, like, the aristocratic vampire, often it's better to delay, because that eats a day action. Giving them a bite actually doesn't eat a day action. So, in that sense, this is almost worse than the normal effect. And yeah, that's about as bad as it gets for a card. Obviously, it's good if you can get a kill. It's good if you can use it to counter a stake. You kind of have to use it at that point. You don't have to. But bites aren't that big of a deal. So those are all of the events. Of the ones that I went through just here, in terms of ones that I classified as not that bad, there are 3, 6, 9 individual cards, because there's 2 copies of Hidden Search, and yeah. So 9 of 25, that's a significant number, but it's not that big. That's about a third. It's not a third, it's a little more than that. So keep that in mind. And look into the discard pile and keep an eye on, okay, which of these events are in the discard pile. Are there a bunch of really bad Dracula events in the discard pile? Or a bunch of really good ones? And usually you only see that with Mystic Research or of the events that Dracula's already played. Don't feel like you can never Night Supply, but understand the risks. And a lot of what this game is about is calculating risk. And hopefully you've gotten some feedback on how to better use your Dracula events as Dracula. Generally, hold on to all of your Dracula events until it's best to use them. And as hunters, don't flip out if Dracula has an event. Maybe he has one of the bad ones. And so don't lose heart. It's actually really important not to do that in this game. You can really feel like you're really behind as the hunters. And in reality, Dracula's sweating bullets because you're actually right next to him and he doesn't. You don't know it. I guess I'll talk a little bit about Good Luck. There's 2 copies of Good Luck. It's used to remove a roadblock, to cancel a false tip, or to discard a Dracula's ally, and it doesn't cost an action. That's why I say the ally effects are so bad. It's why Roadblock isn't that bad. And it gets a little complicated with false tip. Actually, I want to go over that just real quick. So, if you try to move by rail, and he plays false tip, then you move the other direction. If you play Good Luck to cancel the false tip, you move normally. If you play the Chartered Carriage, and he plays false tip, you don't move. If you play the Chartered Carriage, and he plays false tip, and you play the Good Luck, you move normally. Does that make sense? Hopefully it makes sense. That's all I have to say about the Dracula events. You won't tend to see them. But if you do, don't lose heart. Instead, have Godspeed.